Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the chaotic origins of modern monopolies to uncover the precise mechanics JP Morgan used to build them. If you've ever wondered how scattered cutthroat businesses morphed into massive corporate titans, well, it all comes down to the architectural blueprint of one single man who looked at a fractured American economy and decided, right then and there, that he was going to organize it. Here is how we're breaking down Morgan's playbook today. We'll start with the chaotic railroad industry, move into the actual mechanics of Morganization, look at his role as a boardroom dictator, see how he scaled this monopoly concept, and finally, look at how he ended up bailing out America itself. Starting with Section 1, the chaotic railroad industry, the problem before the Morgan playbook. So, to understand Morgan's cure, you really have to look at the disease. Before Morgan stepped in, the 19th century railroad industry was just a hyper-competitive, fragmented mess. You had companies literally laying identical tracks right next to each other, fiercely slashing prices just to steal a few customers. It was incredibly unstable. Post-Morgan, it's the complete opposite. We're talking consolidated monopolies under unified ownership, strict price controls, and rock-solid stability. Now, here's a number you really need to keep in mind: 60%. At that time, railroad companies accounted for a massive 60% of America's total stock market capitalization. This wasn't just some niche sector of the economy, right? It was the absolute financial engine of the United States. Control the railroads and you control the nation's wealth. Which brings us to Section 2, the mechanics of Morganization, the blueprint for order. To fix this completely fractured market, Morgan didn't just throw money at the problem. He developed a highly specific mechanical solution that we now call Morganization. Where everyone else saw brutal, endless competition, Morgan saw an opportunity for economies of scale. The idea was ruthless but simple. Take over underfinanced companies, streamline their management, and merge them into unified conglomerates to just absolutely dominate the market. And here is the actual four-step mechanical formula he used on repeat to conquer the industry. Step 1, swoop in and buy up those underfinanced, struggling railroads. Step 2, immediately streamline their management and operations. Step 3, merge these smaller companies into one dominant conglomerate. And Step 4, with that massive consolidated power, you easily crush whatever competitors are left. Then you just buy them up and feed them right back into Step 1. It was basically a flawless, self-sustaining machine. Moving on to Part 3, the boardroom dictator, enforcing the strategy. Executing a machine like that perfectly and on a massive scale required a completely uncompromising leadership style. As it was said of him, John wasn't content with simply buying shares. He was a man who craved control. He needed to be the one calling the shots. He was never, ever a passive investor. If a struggling railroad desperately needed his financing, he demanded absolute authority over their board of directors in exchange. He outright refused to help companies unless he got full board control. And once he was in, he proactively reshuffled corporate leadership, making sure he was sitting at the head of the table. Through this control, he eliminated that pesky competitive pricing and guaranteed predictable profits. And here's why that is absolutely crucial. By ruthlessly neutralizing the competition, he created such a stable ecosystem that it successfully lured massive waves of European wealth straight into the U.S. economy. He essentially made American railways a safe bet for the rest of the world. Let's look at Section 4, scaling the monopoly concept beyond the railroads. Once the Morganization playbook proved undeniably successful on the rails, it was time to scale. He applied these exact same mechanics to the rest of the American economy. To really grasp the magnitude of this, think about this. Morgan eventually acquired ownership of a staggering 1/3 of all U.S. railroads. One private citizen controlling 1/3 of a superpower's infrastructure. But honestly, he was just getting started. In 1901, he buys Carnegie Steel for $480 million, merges it with competitors, and creates U.S. Steel. This was a $1.4 billion behemoth, literally the world's very first billion-dollar corporation. To put that massive number into perspective, every single other manufacturing company in the United States combined was capitalized at roughly $7.6 billion. Morgan's single steel entity just completely dwarfed massive swaths of the American economy. He just seamlessly applied this exact same strategy of streamlining and merging distressed assets everywhere he looked. He orchestrated a record-breaking $40 million bond transaction for the Northern Pacific Railroad. He formed the Northern Securities Corporation, which famously caused huge friction with Teddy Roosevelt over antitrust violations. He even merged Edison Electric with competitors to birth General Electric, and played a massive role in creating what would become AT&T. The mechanics worked in steel, they worked in electricity, and they worked in telecommunications. Which leads us to our final section, bailing out America, the ultimate test of Morganization. So what happens when one man's consolidated power actually eclipses the federal government itself? Well, during the catastrophic depression of 1893, unchecked investments burst. The U.S. didn't have a central bank. Investors rushed to cash in bonds for gold, and America's gold reserves plummeted to a perilous $9 million. The government was pushed to the absolute brink of defaulting on its loans. Because of this, Morgan repeatedly had to step in as an unofficial central bank, using his vast consolidated wealth to rescue the United States from total economic collapse. In 1895, his syndicate provided $65 million in gold to bail out the Treasury. By 1901, he's consolidating massive trusts. And then, in 1907, he's called upon yet again to single-handedly halt a nationwide banking panic. And the 1907 panic is really the ultimate application of his methods on a national scale. To stop a domino effect of failing banks, a 70-year-old Morgan summons the nation's leading bankers to his private Madison Avenue library. He proposes a bailout plan, and then he quite literally locks the doors. No joke, he refused to let the most powerful financiers in the country leave until they agreed to his unified plan. Because when the fate of the national economy is on the line, sometimes you just have to lock a bunch of billionaires in a room until they cooperate. He simply forced cooperation to create stability, exactly like he did with the railroads. The big takeaway here is the double-edged sword of having this much centralized power. His mechanical interventions undeniably saved the economy, sure, but they absolutely terrified the public and lawmakers. It sparked the Pujo Committee investigations into Wall Street's money trust, and really highlighted the existential danger of relying on a single private citizen to keep the lights on in America. You can't just hope a billionaire is around to lock people in a library every time there's a crisis, right? So his actions directly paved the way for the creation of the Federal Reserve. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought about the mechanics of Morganization and the true price of economic order. Does stabilizing an entire industry or an entire national economy justify giving one private citizen absolute corporate and financial power? J.P. Morgan absolutely cured the chaos, but in doing so, he became a power unto himself. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. I hope it gave you a clear, structured view into the mind of the architect of modern corporate order. Keep questioning the mechanics behind the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.